Welcome to Bay, the only series featuring speakers from San Francisco to Silicon Valley to Monterey. We've got a great show lined up for you today. In addition to hearing from an advanced speaker and evaluator, we'll take a look into Cisco, how they're using digital media in today's world. And in our final segment, we'll hear from an additional 3 advanced speakers on speaking tips, what you can implement today to take your speech to the next level. Our first speaker comes to us from San Francisco's Evening Stars. He'll be presenting project number 2 from the advanced manual, Humorously Speaking. His primary objective today is to present a serious speech with an opening and closing that are humorous stories. That closing story will re-emphasize his main points. Please welcome Scott Goering.
Thank you. Good evening. I want to talk to you this evening about conflict, and I want to talk to you about the quality of the dialogue that takes place around conflict in our society today. We have an upcoming election year, and as much as I want to tell you this speech is motivated by the politicians who are making statements in the news today, I have to tell you more than anything else, it's motivated by what I see happening on Facebook. I have hundreds of Facebook friends, and I lived the first half of my life in a small town in east central Nebraska, and I've lived the second half of my life in San Francisco, California. And so I have a wide variety of friends having a very wide variety of social and political positions, and they have no problem posting about this on my newsfeed in Facebook. And I have no problem seeing a diversity of opinions in my newsfeed. But what's concerning to me is the level of dialogue and understanding that I see communicated in some of these posts. And again, I think it's very important to be able to stand up for one's convictions. But at the same time, I can't help but wonder if there's any sort of a meaningful dialogue or understanding that's happening in the way in which people defend their positions. So much of what I'm seeing is along the lines of, this is the way things are, and those other people are wingnuts. And whatever they're saying doesn't really make any sense, and it doesn't really merit even talking about. Well, that's not a very good use of our resources, our time and our energy in promoting any sort of dialogue that's going to advance the cause of society. And this became increasingly clear to me a couple months ago when I was in court. Now, some of you are aware of the fact that I'm an attorney. And on occasion, I engage in a little dialogue or a little exercise called meeting and conferring with other attorneys or opposing counsel as it pertains to particular cases. I was in court or getting ready to go into court one day, and I had the attorney on the other side of a case in the hallway with me, and I was attempting to talk to her. I was attempting to see if there was any sort of a resolution that we could come to instead of taking it in front of a judge and letting a judge make a decision about our case. And we were talking, and there was a lot of tension between the two of us, and we were both zealously advocating for our clients' respective positions. And I realized, this conversation isn't going anywhere. What I really needed to do was to try to diffuse some of the tension, to try to broaden the avenue of communication that was taking place between the two of us. And so I took a deep breath, I took a step back, and I said, let me make sure I understand your client's position here. And then slowly, with great care and even specificity, I made it a point of trying to recite back to her what I understood her client's position to be. I made it a point of trying to mirror back to her the emotions that I understood her client was feeling about different parts of the case. And it was really amazing to see what happened, because for a split second, I watched this attorney, my opponent, suddenly soften. It was as though her defenses fell away. And then just as suddenly, I saw her kind of collect herself again and kind of tense up, because she knew I was trying to trick her. She knew I was trying to do something. And I said, is that an accurate understanding of your client's position in this case? And she says, well, yes, it is. It is. And she implied that it was important that I was finally coming around to understanding her position. I said, that's great. I want you to do me a favor. Can you recite back to me what you understand my client's position to be in this matter? And there was this confused look on her face, and she said, you mean like out loud? And I said, yeah, the same way that I just said it to you. Can you say back what you understand my client's position to be. And she said, well, why would I want to do that? And I said, so I can have the assurance that you understand my client's position, just the same way that I did it for you. And she said, well, no, there's no reason to do that. We don't even need to have this conversation. And at that point, the conversation shut down, and it effectively eliminated any chance of us coming up with any kind of an agreement. And then further, we went into a courtroom, a judge behind a bench heard our case, didn't really know us, didn't really know our clients, but made a major decision that affected both our clients' lives. But what became clear to me in that moment is this, is that sometimes people are so entrenched in their position that they spend all of their time, all their energy, all their resources into defending that position and don't dare try to extend themselves to, in any meaningful way, trying to understand what people on the other side of the conflict are saying or even feeling. In the case with my colleague, it was as though if she spoke my client's position out loud, she was afraid that it would lend it some sort of legitimacy. And we certainly don't want to do that, because we know that we're right and there's nothing to be gained from acknowledging anything that that other person is saying or feeling. That is not a productive way to engage in dialogue and public debate. It's not a constructive way to come to a clearer understanding of what needs to be happening in society as we see all these things changing around us. And so in closing, I want to encourage you that as our society changes, there are very constructive ways in which to assert our positions. There is constructive ways in which to defend our positions. But there are very constructive ways in which to understand other people's positions. And I want to suggest that in this age of public dialogue, public tumult, is where we need to be putting our energy and our time at this time. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your speech with us tonight, Scott. You mentioned that your speech was partly inspired by what you've seen on Facebook. Mm-hmm. Do you think that outlet has helped or hurt people resolve their conflicts?
So what Facebook has allowed for is that it is a conduit that allows for the exchange of information and viewpoints, and it would be easy to be overloaded by all the information that is transmitted, through whether it be through Facebook or their social media or the internet. And I think the more pertinent inquiry is, are we paying attention to the right things? Are we paying attention to those arguments that are most reasonably presented and thereby informing our own understanding of things? So Facebook can be good, can be bad. It depends on being able to pick out the most important pieces of information that it allows to be communicated.
I see. Now, I know you spent some time growing up in Kansas and are now living in San Francisco. Do you see any difference in how people treat conflict in either location, or are people the same everywhere?
So people on the right, people on the left, progressives, conservatives, traditionalists, at their weakest moments resort to the same sorts of mudslinging and derision, regardless of where they're at on the spectrum. So that's what I've noticed.
Great. One last question for you. I can't help but thinking back to the days of cavemen, where conflict was resolved by picking up a club and bonking the next person on the head. Mm-hmm. No discussion whatsoever. Mm-hmm. It seems you may encounter a little bit of that same behavior in your profession as a lawyer. Mm-hmm. Is there any hope for us to move past this and have a larger generation that's open to conflict and hearing other people's thoughts?
Well, I think within the legal profession, you're right. There are seemingly cavemen who go in and want to do as much damage as they can to other people, and I think that there are people who have far more reasoned ways of dealing with people and are far more nuanced. And yeah, the purpose of this speech is to hopefully promote greater dialogue and understanding. I really believe that if we're really going to make progress, it's going to take place not just beating each other up. I mean, the cavemen, we're beyond hopefully what cavemen were doing. I'm all about creating dialogue.
Great. This is a great start. Thank you so much, Scott.
Absolutely. Thank you.
To give Scott some feedback, we've invited a fellow club member at Evening Stars. Please welcome our evaluator, Tony Saccardi.
Thank you, Kristyn. Scott, it's my pleasure to evaluate your speech today. First, I'm going to tell everyone that I know Scott. We're from the same club. I've heard many of his speeches, so I'm going to take some shortcuts. I'm not going to evaluate you as if I heard you for the first time. This was from the Humorously Speaking Manual, project number 2. You're supposed to tell us a serious story, but you're supposed to start with a funny story to get a smile from us and gain our attention. And then you're supposed to leave us with another funny story to leave us with a smile and some thoughts about the subject. Let me start with the beginning. At the beginning, you started with the elections out there. It's pretty heavy. And then you turn that into Facebook, which is, unless you're a teenager, pretty light. And that made everybody smile. We all understood where you were going with that, so that worked really well. It was a very short, very sweet transition to where you wanted to take us. Then you took us to Facebook, people commenting on each other, not exactly the right way, wasting their energy. Maybe our energy should go somewhere else. I was completely with you up to that point and after that. The transitions were very, very smooth. Then you took us to the main story, to the main topic of your speech, the discussion with your fellow attorney about what you wanted to get from her and how you tried so hard to get something from her and you got nothing at the end. That in itself was funny as well. And then you left us with the message at the end of the speech. There were a couple of things I noticed that we could do differently to improve your speech. Everything else you did was absolutely great. One was the pacing. You had a tendency to pace a little bit while you were giving the speech. And that was the time where you were talking about your discussion with the other attorney. And at that time, that's when you could use immobility and long pauses to make it even worse. You try so hard, you try so hard, you try so hard. You wait for an answer from her and pause, long pause, longer pause. Not what you expected. And that would make it more dramatic and help with the funny side of the story. And at the end, when you leave us and with the message, I felt, wait a minute, the transition from the beginning to Facebook was very funny. I want more of that. I want another Facebook story at the end. And I think that would wrap up the story very, very nicely. Again, a great speech, very thoughtful, great material. Thank you for bringing this material here.
Thank you, Tony. Up next, we'll take a look at Cisco and their telepresence, how they're changing the weekly Toastmasters meeting. And this video actually features our own Bay to Bay crew member, Dennett Lewis. Let's take a look.
I would now request Jim to read out objectives of P3.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow members, and most welcome guests. Gary's project is Get to the Point.
Well, what we just did is we had a telepresence meeting, what's called a point-to-point meeting. So we had 2 rooms. Half the room is here in San Jose, and the other half that we had was in Singapore. This is a great idea for Toastmasters. I would like to see these meetings occurring at least once a quarter.
Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah.
It's essential that Toastmasters learn how to communicate through these new tools. And I think I'd love to see a manual come out, an advanced speaking manual from Toastmasters on emphasizing points. How do we communicate with these new tools?
A lot of information about genomes and singularity and stuff like that. So what I will be doing is to share.
I was expecting that we would have delays in our conversation, but no, it's just like we're talking across the table. So this is great. I'm glad to be a part of it.
Technologies like this are going to get more and more popular, and you'll see different ideas popping up, and the way we communicate in the future is going to change, and I think we're really on to the future here.
And what brings us together is this movement called Toastmasters. and we learn communication and leadership to enhance our communication skill, where we can bring all these skills back to our workplace, back to our family, and back to our society.
I think we're breaking into something new. This is going to be a way that we all need to be comfortable in communicating in the future, and before long there'll be lots of other Toastmaster meetings occurring like this.
Pokinsium, 1R, 3N. Wish, 1 soul. Giri, 3R, 1 7 soul. Talking, 4
Here. So collaboration is wonderful. Believe in the power of collaboration, and you can definitely achieve more. Thank you so much.
The major paradigm shift of the Homo sapiens is just around the corner. Welcome to the new world.
Excellent. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
It's good to see you. Have a good day.
When I first joined Toastmasters 9 years ago, I was very lucky to have encountered some mentors, people that were available to give me speaking tips and help guide me along my Toastmasters journey. Well, tonight, the luck is yours. We've invited 3 exceptional speakers here to give you some tips on speaking. Our first tipster comes to us from Bayview Toastmasters in Monterey, and will be speaking about connecting to your audience. Please welcome Kristian Crump.
Thank you, Kristyn. Audience connection can be exhilarating or downright frightening. It all depends on how you feel about your speech. And this tip is going to have 3 main parts. We're going to talk about being present, being prepared, and being practiced. First is being present. We want to make eye contact with the audience. And it's an awkward eye contact. Awkward for the speaker, not for the audience. We want to engage with each audience member for 1 to 2 seconds, maybe 3, and move throughout the room. The awkwardness is if we linger too long and we start staring at that audience member. And they start thinking, is something wrong with me? Did I not do my tie? And the audience members are thinking, is something wrong with him? Did he not do his tie? And so we want to avoid the awkwardness on the audience's part and keep the awkwardness to us. The second is being relaxed with being present, being in our own body. You see, when we very first start speaking, all eyes are on us. 10, 20, 200 eyeballs are staring all at me. And so if you look, it feels like everything is pointing back and all my energy is on my heels. And so we practice relaxation and we give a few speeches. And then we feel a little more prepared and we're right on the middle of our feet. We give a few more speeches, we get a little bit longer in our competent communication manual, and then we get to speech number 9 or 10, and we're really engaging the audience. All 10 toes are gripping the carpet as we lean into the audience. That is when we know we have engaged the audience. The next is to be prepared. Be prepared allows us to feel comfortable in our own skin. If I know exactly what I'm going to say or where I'm going to go, where I want to take the audience, it allows me to be relaxed. As a speaker, if I'm wondering where I'm going to go, wondering what I'm going to say, it loses connection with the audience. I'm thinking, you're thinking, where's this guy going? And so the speaker is nervous, the audience is nervous, it doesn't end very well. So be prepared and be relaxed. And the third is to be practiced. Practice connection, not just with your audiences, but as you're walking through your day and you see your boss, smile. Say, how's it going? How you doing? And then you maybe go to lunch and you keep going to lunch and you walk up and you say, nice to see you. You practice connection with everyone that you meet. And as you practice connection through your day, through your week, and through your years, it will become natural as you stand in front of an audience and connect with them. So remember, be present, be prepared, and be practiced, and you can connect like a pro. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Kristian. Our second tipster comes to us as the Vice President of Public Relations for Silicon Valley Storytellers. He'll be giving us some information on enhancing presentations with stories. Please welcome Atul Nayak.
We are all born storytellers. See, stories have the inherent structure to grab attention, convey a message, and inspire action. Why then do we hesitate to tell stories in formal presentation? Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there was a salesman who traveled the countryside selling his product. Everyone loved his product, except for the evil king. This product is ruining my kingdom. I have to kill it. If there's anyone here who thinks this product should live, speak now. Out of the crowd came a voice. I can convince you why this product should still live, said the salesman. Okay, come to the palace tomorrow and we'll talk. So the salesman goes home, he opens up his trusty laptop, he pulls up PowerPoint, makes slide after slide about endless statistics and dizzying market projections. And the next morning, he goes to the palace. Let's see what you got, sneers the king. And the salesman gets started, he plows through his PowerPoint slides, customer case studies, more statistics, analyst quotes. At about the 85th slide about return on investment, the king begins to squirm in his throne. Originally, I was only going to kill the product, the king says, but this presentation is criminal. Off with his head. A funny story, this was published on a website called Fast Company by David Lavanda. But you get the point. The point is that a message was conveyed through a story. Presentations at work are expected to be logical, full of data and reason. They appeal to the head. But when the presentation does not appeal to the heart, that's when it fails to spur action. I hope in your next presentation, you decide to tell a story and bring life into your presentation.
Thank you, Atul. Our last but not least tipster of the day is coming to us from her very own Palo Alto Club, and will be giving us information on impromptu presentations. Please welcome Birgit Starmanns.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. A few years ago, I was sitting in my office, well, cubicle, and I received a call. In an hour, you have the opportunity to actually do a video, and that video will be part of a product launch. I had never given that presentation before. This is probably the epitome of an impromptu speech. Now, of course, any marketer knows that you have to take that opportunity. So I had 1 hour. Well, that brings us to the first tip about impromptu speaking. You always need to be prepared. Now, it seems a little counterintuitive. If it's an impromptu speech, how can you be prepared? But when it comes to either your work or anything that you're involved in, a religious institution, or training your kids' Little League, anything, you need to be able to read up on what's current, whether it's the news or whether it's the competition or whether it's other companies that are trying to sell the same thing. You really need to be up to date on what you're doing. And you need to be up to date all the time. You don't always have the luxury of knowing, oh, in 3 months I'm going to be at a conference, and at that point in time I can go ahead and do this presentation. I have a lot of time to prepare. This was an opportunity that I took with an hour's notice. And luckily, I had just finished my PowerPoint presentation that I was going to roll out to our sales force. So I'd never given it before, but that way I could actually go home and put on some clothes that were more appropriate to be on video. Now, the other piece about impromptu presentations, just because it's impromptu doesn't mean it shouldn't have a structure. It still needs a beginning and a middle and an end. And there are many short, impromptu situations that we go through every day, whether it's a job interview, whether it's a question and answer session at the end of a presentation at a conference. So these are all opportunities where you have really mini impromptu speeches where you really need to go ahead and have a structure, a beginning, middle, and end. Yeah, especially when it comes to something like a Q&A session at the end of a presentation. You don't want to leave with, oh, I don't know the answer to that. Now, that being said, if you actually don't know the answer, don't make it up. You're going to get caught. Somebody's going to call you, somebody's going to buy a product based on something that you said, then you're going to have all sorts of issues because the customer thought that they were buying something that they're not getting. It's okay to admit, I'll get back with you later. And then finally, as we heard from a fellow tipster, it's important to tell stories. So end with a story, and it can be a personal story, it can be a story about a customer, it can be a story about a partner that you're working with. It doesn't have to be a personal story, but that's always the cleanest way to wrap things up. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank you, Birgit. What a great time we've had here today. I hope you've enjoyed our speech, our interesting video about telepresence at Cisco, and of course, some tips from our very favorite speakers here. To learn more about Bay to Bay and Toastmasters, visit us at d4tm.org for more information, not just on Bay to Bay, but on contests, speeches, TLIs, all sorts of events, as well as clubs that you can join if you're interested in joining more than one. Do you dare? Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.